And I found out that I can put all the strategies that we have studied into 4 buckets. And, and this is the framework that I'm offering for motivating yourself and also those around you.
All right, welcome everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Ayelet Fishbach. And I was really excited to invite you onto the show today because I had Dr. Ethan Cross on the show. He kicked off season 1 with us, and then he recommended your new book, Get It Done. So I'm excited to be talking about all the different components of motivation today, and then also just learned about your incredible research and work in fundraising specifically. So we're going to get into all the good stuff. Let's have you just give us a little bit of background and bio around sort of what brought you ultimately to the book and what brings you to the conversation today.
I am a motivation scientist, and I've been doing it for many years. I've been interested in what gets people to study, to save, to eat healthily, to exercise, and also to support social causes as they work with other people. And just a couple of years ago, I realized that my knowledge is kind of like, it becomes too messy for me. Like I really need to organize what we know in motivation science. And so I decided to just take all this amazing knowledge that we developed as a field and organize it. And I found out that I can put all the strategies that we have studied into 4 buckets. And this is the framework that I'm offering for motivating yourself and also those around you.
Amazing. And I love that we're going to get to talk about motivation, both from the donor perspective, what motivates donors to give and sort of their level and engagement in giving, and also what motivates fundraisers to do the fundraising work or stay motivated to do the fundraising work. But why don't you start by just telling us what those 4 buckets are? And then I know there are a few of them that we're going to dig particularly deep into.
Yes. So the first thing is setting a goal. Okay? And you want to define the goal such that it feels good. It's not a chore. It's really the destination. It's something that's exciting for you. You want to put a number of it. There are a number of things that really helps goal setting. The second bucket is sustaining motivation as you're going from here to there. So, how should you monitor progress? When should you look back? Okay? Are you at the 20% half full or the 80% half on empty? And, when we looked at donations, we often intuitively represent that in terms of progress that we give others and ourselves the feedback. And I'm asking, what kind of feedback is the most motivating? The third bucket is managing multiple goals. And so, everything that is going on in your life, we never just want one thing. When do people decide to prioritize? When they decide to put all these goals together and find the right compromise, how people engage with self-control conflicts, which are goal conflicts. And then the final 4th bucket is leveraging social support. And this is really where we did a lot of work on fundraising, because if a goal is important, you do it with other people. You have other people working with you. Also for your individual goals, you have other people helping. But specifically in the context of fundraising, it is a goal that we are pursuing with other people, which is one reason why I was excited to talk to you today.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we actually start there and go backwards a little bit, because I think what's really interesting about what you're saying, or that you're sort of inspiring me to think about for the first time, is perhaps even the relation between the first bucket that you said around sort of clarity around the goal and collectively working towards a goal. So I think about nonprofits and the role that they play in sort of verbalizing or storytelling around a shared goal, and sort of identifying, or how to identify donors that share a goal with them. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, how should organizations think about sort of their clarity of goal in relationship then to sort of the collective pursuing of that goal?
So you should think about your goal in terms of like who's benefiting, okay? How much should you do? Okay, what is the specific number that you're trying to reach by a specific time? Okay, it could be the number of signatures or the amount of money, and you should know what you are trying to get. You should have a very clear goal. Now you should realize that this is not a one person's goal. Okay, so this is not anything like your goal to eat healthily food. To eat healthy food, or to complete a college degree, because this is something that you're doing with other people. And when we think about the other people, well, it could be a group of potential donors that work together to make this happen. It could also be that the group of the people that are helping and the people that are being helped. And so how well do they work together, how much they see themselves as part of a group. One of the things that we found is that how much people, potential donors, identify either with other potential donors or with beneficiaries of the help matters for how much they are willing to give.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about that. I'm really curious to learn more about that.
So that work was in the context of looking at how feedback on progress motivates people to work on their goal. And when you think about feedback on progress, you can either look back or look forward. You can either look at how much you have done or how much is still missing. And what we found is that for people that are highly committed to the organization that they are helping, it is best to tell them how much is still missing. Whereas new donors or people that that never gave were more motivated by thinking about the money that has been contributed. So to give you an example, in one study, we had, this is a study that we conducted in Seoul with an organization that was trying to raise money to children in Uganda, and it was many years ago. And they had two groups of donors. They had people that were raising a monthly contribution, so the highly committed people, and they had people who gave their contact information, meaning they want to engage but never made any contribution. So not committed, but still want to engage. And what they found is that if they gave the first group, that those that give a monthly donation, if they told them about a special campaign to which we already collected half of the money, they were more likely to give. If they told them that we are still, I will have to get this back because I did it the other way around. So what they found is that if they approach the people who are giving on a monthly basis, the highly committed individuals, and tell them about the money that's still missing, they are more likely to give than if they tell them about the money that they already had. The new donors, just the opposite. Okay, they are more motivated if you tell them about the money that they already collected. Now, what's going on? If you are highly committed to a cause, you are more likely to act if you feel that you are falling behind, if you feel that you are not quite where you want to be. Okay, like you are much more likely to respond to, we are still so far, we are like 50% away from where we want to be. You want to make progress. If you're uncommitted, well, you're trying to figure out whether this is even worthy of your time or money. And so if other people are doing it, then that's a good signal that this is worthy. Okay? If you hear that other people are not doing it, that 50% is still missing, then you think, well, I guess that's not very important for people and therefore not for me. The critical point is that it's just about how you monitor progress. It's the same objective situation. You are at the 50%. You either emphasize the missing or the completed part. This is going to be a bit of a lengthy answer, but
No, it's really, really interesting because it makes me think about, even for organizations to think about donor segments, perhaps, and what segments of their donors should be getting messaging that focuses on what's left to raise versus how much has been raised based on their level of engagement with the organization. And it makes sense to me, back to what you were saying before. I think this is what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but that there's this component, this identity component, where the folks who are already deeply committed or giving monthly to the organization, they already have the identity component ingrained in them. So when they hear that there's a gap that needs to be closed, they want to participate because there's more buy-in around already, sort of like, people like me close the gap. But for the other folks, if that identity piece hasn't been cemented yet, what they really want is to be a part of the group of people making it happen. And that number has to be demonstrated to be big enough where it's like they want to start to identify with the group of people doing the thing.
So the nice thing is that you already concluded the result of a study that I actually did not describe yet, but you're right. What I described is a study in which what we knew is that some people are giving regularly, so they are more committed than the people who never gave money. But then we had the same thinking as what you just expressed. And so I think a few years later, we ran a study again with the same organization. So this is an organization in Korea, and they are giving money at this time to people in Kenya. And now we directly manipulate their identity, okay? Like how much they identify with the people who are getting the help. And the way we did that is by either talking about the beneficiaries as our children, okay? The children that are supported by our organization. These are all people who are already giving money to this country, to this organization, to help kids. And we either talk about our kids in Kenya. They need our help, okay? And so it feels like you are very much identifying with the group, okay? It's kids, okay? These are the kids that we are responsible for as an organization. Versus another group that read a message about those kids far away. Remember, like, the donors are in Korea, the kids are in Kenya. Like, on the other part of the world, there are these kids, they need your help. And we found exactly what you described, which is that people that feel close to those beneficiaries are giving more. If we tell them how much money we are still missing, where is the people that don't really identify with their beneficiaries are giving more money if we tell them that other people are giving.
Wow. Okay. That is really fascinating. And I want to go back to, I feel myself making an assumption that I want to check a little bit here. So when you talked about the 4 buckets and you talked about clarity around the goal and its relationship to motivation, is what you're saying that even if the goal, that clarity is equally as critical, even when that goal isn't set by you? So like, for these donors, I think what I just want to make sure I'm making the right assumption here, which is that the organization might be setting the goal around the time-bound nature of the campaign, how much they want to raise, what they want it to do. But that clarity that they've set is a piece of the puzzle to both motivate the fundraisers and the staff members of the organization to achieve that goal. But that clarity is also a key component for the donors to participate in the collective component of it.
Yes, it's the clarity of the goal and the clarity of the progress toward the goal. Okay? Knowing exactly where we stand, where we need to be, how well we are doing.
Okay. And that has equal sort of influence and power over both the fundraisers, the people asking, sending out the emails, as it does the donors and funders participating in the campaign.
I completely agree. I would say that most of the research that we did was with the donors or with the potential donors. We studied, among other motivational challenges, what motivates people to give.
Okay. So let me ask a little bit of a different question. We're talking right now about, we are talking about the difference between sort of retained donors that continue to give on an ongoing basis versus sort of newly acquired donors or people who are in that pipeline. When you think about motivation in relation to what creates the greatest retention, so the greatest sort of repeat donors coming back year after year. So let's say the campaign has ended, the goal that was achieved related to one specific thing. And a few months later, the organization, or the next year, perhaps the organization is launching a new campaign with different goals and some different messaging. What are the components of motivation that are really critical to ensure that those same donors participate again?
That's a big question. One thing is really how much they feel committed, how much they feel that this is part of what they do and part of their identity. We looked at what creates this identity, what creates this connection to a campaign or to an organization more generally. And one thing that we discovered is that people think about giving as part of who they are. And, we often allow people to contribute without their name, raise an anonymous contribution. We found out that while people might sometimes choose to do that, that builds very little commitment. These are not the people that will think about your organization as part of their identity. It's the people who sign with their name. It's the people who gave something personal. Let me give you a few examples. We found that when people left a personal message with their contribution, and this is a study in which we basically invited people to buy cookies from a charity, and by that contributing to the charity. And some people were just buying these cookies. Other people were buying the cookie and leaving a message. Those who left the message with their name felt more committed, even though it was really, the message often was just 2 words, just like good luck, Ayelet. Like, really a very symbolic contribution. We found in a study that people who contributed a pen that they had for a while felt connected to the campaign more than, or people who did not donate this pen, or, maybe donated the pen that they just used to sign their name and didn't really care for. An even more impressive demonstration of how you create this commitment that allows you to go back to the person is a study in which we ask people to tell us what would be the contribution that they would consider equal to donating blood. And so, imagine that you had to donate blood, or that you wanted to donate blood, but someone offered that you'll give money instead. How much money would be the same for you personally as donating the blood? And so people are giving us an amount, let's say like $40, which was actually the average amount, but every person has their own amount. And then we ask some people, well, if you donate blood, how committed are you going to be? And the other people, well, if you donate money, how committed you are going to be? Now, people are telling us that blood is the same as money, so they made it equal. Nevertheless, those that considered donating blood felt more committed, because this is such a self-giving, right? This is like really giving out of your body almost, literally. Now, this, of course, is extreme, and most organizations are not interested in our blood, but they might be interested in our signature, or in our opinion. It's a way to to build commitment and this long-term relationship that will allows you to go back to the person.
I love what you're highlighting here, because I think we see in fundraising so many kind of activities that are about the nonprofit giving the donor something in exchange for a monetary contribution, right? Giving them the pen or writing them the note. And I'm not suggesting that it's not important to send thank you notes or anything like that, but I think what you're saying here about how much more connected the donor feels when they also contribute something of meaning in addition to the financial contribution, which is supported by a ton of data we see around things like Giving Tuesday, for example, when people both volunteer and give a financial gift, they're so much more likely to be retained because they've done both at the same time. They've had this experience that sort of roots their identity more deeply in the organization than the click of a button, which maybe gave them a dopamine hit for a moment, but it didn't necessarily like sort of bind them to the organization in the same way. I feel like one of the things I hear from fundraisers a lot is their nervousness around sort of asking for too many things, or they just gave us a financial donation, so how could we then ask them to leave a note, or how could we then ask them for their pen? And what I really hear you saying is that this is like a deep desire of humans to feel connected and to build their identity with causes and organizations they care about. And it's not about extracting things from them that they don't want, but that giving them an opportunity to contribute something really meaningful.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you that this is often unintuitive because we often think that people want to not be bothered. Okay? So, just write the check and you don't need to leave a note. Okay? Don't be bothered by that. And what we find is that, if you choose not to leave a note, you will not leave a note. But if I invite you to make the personal connection, this gives you, the donor, more value. Okay, this is a social connection, and when we support a cause, we see ourselves as part of a group that's doing something together, and we want to be involved. We want to be part of the thing. We don't want to just like you take my money and then like don't bother me. Bother me, connect me. Okay, but this is something that we do together, and I want to be involved, or at least have the option to be involved, to be part of the movement. You're also illustrating some very general point that as people, we see ourselves as part of a group. Okay, when I say we landed on the moon, okay, or we won a game over the weekend. Well, I'm not an astronaut and I don't play professional sports. Okay, so I don't mean that Ayelet did any of this. I feel like I'm part of the group. When you're thinking about fundraising, making people part of the group is a big part of what it means to support a cause.
I want to shift and start to ask you some questions about kind of fundraiser motivation and behavior. But before I do that, I'm curious, from your research around fundraising and donor behavior, was there anything else that you found that was really surprising to you?
I'll mention just one more finding, which is a recent study in which we looked at two messages: express support and make a difference. And I think that what was somewhat intuitive, that express support means that you should give less than if I ask you to make a difference. So we expected that when the message is to express support, then people are going to be doing less. And part of it, some of the studies were about giving money. Some of the studies were about just doing the work, okay, just helping the organization. And when we asked to express support, then people were doing less than when we asked them to make a difference. But what was really interesting for us is that when we asked to express support, then people were much more likely to help. And we observe this effect where expressing support means that you really feel you need to help, and a very large group of people were willing to engage, whereas the make a difference message was kind of suggesting that you should not do anything unless you plan to really make a difference, okay, really make a big thing. And one of the studies that we ran was with fundraising here at the University of Chicago, and we found that when the message is to make a difference, then like, people are just giving less because only few people who are willing to give a lot are giving.
Wow, that is really fascinating. I would have had the same assumption. That's really interesting. It also makes me think you had mentioned before, so maybe I'll ask one more question about donor behavior. You had mentioned before differences in messaging that gets a lot of people to give versus fewer people to give more. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is that study that messages that
Okay.
are about expressing support are getting many people to give. Messages that are about making a difference, the way people understand it is give only if you can really move the needle. It's not about every donation counts, it's about making a difference. And it's important for organizations to the extent that organizations often need to be very clear about their goal for the campaign. Okay, so let me give you the example of us as a school. Okay, if we are getting our students to give to the school, well, students can't make a difference. We really want to use messages that emphasize express support and getting to 100% participation. Okay, we just want to create the habit of give back. When we approach people 15 years after they finished their degree, well, at that point, we want to engage you if you're interested in making a difference.
Yes. Okay. That's really interesting. I want to think about that more, but I'm sort of fascinated by that. And, especially as we think about all the different ways during COVID and, the pandemic and lockdown, people have been sort of participating in activism and philanthropy in different ways. And there's been maybe a lower barrier to entry than perhaps there was before for certain organizations. It's interesting, like, I think how folks maybe think about what they support based on small actions or activities or little donations here versus where do they feel like they're really making a difference. Like even when I just think about those words for myself, I'm like, oh yeah, there are 100 things I support, but I am probably making a difference on 2 or 3 of them, right? Where I'm like really investing more of my time and more of my money. So now that I'm really thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. But my first gut, maybe because we see the language make a difference so often, when, I would have thought that was more moving. But so I'm just really fascinated by that data. But okay, let me actually force myself to talk about fundraisers and motivation because I am really interested in when we sort of go back to those 4 buckets and we think about the piece around identifying the right goals and then also understanding the relationship between competing goals. I was telling you before we hit record that, fundraising is such an uncomfortable experience, particularly for new fundraisers, particularly when there hasn't been work done around sort of mindset, just the ways our brains naturally feel about fundraising and the level of sort of uncertainty activates a lot of our chatter and just, inner critic work. And so fundraisers, and I am speaking for myself for 13 years, avoid a lot of the most impactful activities when it comes to fundraising. They'll sort of continue to organize their donor database, but they won't send the outreach email. We do a lot of kind of busy work and we're like, we're fundraising, but like really we're just kind of doing all the busy work around fundraising. And the biggest way for us to impact how much we're actually raising is by these scarier actions, right? And so I when I was first looking at your work, though, and I was thinking about this idea of competing goals, I was like, this is also particularly hard for nonprofit leaders, and especially small nonprofit leaders, where the executive director is responsible for so many things. And one of their goals is fundraising. And so how do you, like, will you just talk to us a little bit about that and how you suggest people look at competing goals and think about prioritization, especially when perhaps there's like a fear component or a demotivating factor related to one of them?
Yeah, so many questions there, and thank you for bringing the conversation back to where we're hoping to focus, which is donors' motivation. Let me break it into several questions. One issue is why we are uncomfortable asking people to help in the first place. Well, turn out that it's largely a misprediction. We are concerned about asking for help because we think that we will get rejected and we will feel bad about it. We underpredict usually how much people are going to like getting connected to their request and how much positive feelings are going to result from the interaction. So in our mind, interaction is often more negative than when it actually played out. And we know it for all kinds of requests. Okay? When you ask people for something, you envision in your mind, you're imagining that the rejection. Usually that's not what happens. And so usually it's much more positive experience than what you imagine. Then your second question was, or the second issue that you've raised was, okay, well, you think that this is going to be uncomfortable, then what do you do? Well, one possibility is you just try not to think about it. Quite interesting. Well, I will do it sometimes when I get a chance. Another possibility is facing the discomfort and anticipating the discomfort. And so the two types of findings here. One is that when you anticipate something to be hard, you are more prepared to do that. Okay, when you engage in envisioning the obstacles, you are in a way readier. I use the metaphor of preparing to lift a heavy piece of furniture. Okay, if you think that the piece of furniture is very light, well, you are going to approach it with very little force, and it's going to be really hard. If I tell you, I want you to help me lift the sofa, and by the way, it's really heavy, you will be more ready to do that. And when it gets to motivated actions, when people envision the obstacles, when they say, this is what I want to do, and this is what's going to prevent me from doing it, they are better able to do that. At one point, we ran a diary study in which we just had people in the morning, okay, list what you need to do and what will prevent you from doing it. And just this exercise of thinking why this is going to be hard made it easier for people. And then you're raising what we call in the literature the licensing pattern, where I don't do that thing that I'm supposed to do, but I do something else, and that license me not to do the thing that I am supposed to do. And maybe instead of actually making the call, I will arrange the list or do something else that's not quite making the ask, but that will make me feel licensed to not do the ask today or tomorrow or next week.
Yeah. Yeah. So so is that piece around sort of preparing themselves for, like, okay, you're probably going to look for a distraction here. Like, this is scary and you might distract yourself by doing this other activity. Is just having awareness around that alone enough to increase motivation to take the scary action?
Yes, but it doesn't mean that this is the only thing that you could do.
Okay, tell us all the things.
Well, another thing is to reframe what discomfort means to you. And so let's move away from donors to a very different activity that often makes people uncomfortable, and this is acting or improvisation. And we recently ran a study with Second City, the famous improvisation club here in Chicago, where we found that if we tell people your goal is to feel uncomfortable, feeling uncomfortable is a good sign. Okay, it's a sign that you're learning. That made them more motivated to engage in the exercise. We then use the same technique in getting people to read information that they didn't like, do things that don't feel comfortable, but they might feel are necessary. And so what we do here is encouraging people to think about your discomfort as a sign that you did the right work today. Okay, you were supposed to feel uncomfortable, at least until that becomes a habit and that starts to feel uncomfortable. And particularly if you are new, if you're doing something new, by the way, it's not just about reaching out to donors. Everything that you are doing that you're not an expert in is going to feel a bit uncomfortable. But if you think about this discomfort as a sign that I'm learning, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, then discomfort means that it was a productive day.
Wow. I love that so much. We talk about that a lot inside my program because that was a very, very fundamental shift for me as a fundraiser, to recognize that the discomfort I was feeling right before a funder meeting was actually a really good sign that I was pushing my boundary. And, I'll have folks come to me sometimes saying that nobody's ever said no to them in a funder meeting, or said not that much, and to me, I'm like, that's not a good sign. Like, that means you're not asking anywhere near what your funders are capable of. And so I think that's just such an important point that I just want to put a pin in for listeners, which is like, that discomfort is such a good sign that you are fundraising on your edge, that you're pushing yourself to think bigger, that there is not a lot of great fundraising that happens inside folks' comfort zone. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I'm curious, sort of going back to the fourth bucket around using the help of others to stay motivated. I'm thinking about, or to sort of keep you on track, I'm thinking now about fundraising teams and how they can use some of the principles that you've talked about here to support, like, internal support for overall, like, annual fundraising goals, but also creating space for some of the things you've said, like that discomfort's okay, that, and how they can sort of create a culture or a support system that really keeps everyone motivated.
I think that you are referring to a culture that acknowledges that there are setbacks, that there are failures, that, it doesn't always work as you anticipated, because you're absolutely right that if it works exactly as your best case scenario, then maybe you should adjust your best case scenario, right? Maybe you're not asking for enough. I remember that at one point I read the advice. I'm not a great baker, and so when I make whipped cream, I never know how long to mix it. So I once read the advice: just over mix it once, okay, and then you'll see, it's like happens many minutes after you thought that it actually happens. So I took that idea for many other goals in my life that are much more important. Just like, see what it takes to fail, so you understand. You get a sense of when you're asking too much from other people or from yourself. Okay? Like, this is the kind of thing where it's not going to work. And so we want to be in this area where, not everything that we are doing is a success. So we know that we are pushing ourselves. And then we need to have a culture that celebrates the failure, that learns from failure. What we find too often is that people either don't learn anything from negative experience, that is, they don't even remember it. Okay? They can't even tell you what happened,
Mm.
or that they learn in way too much instead of extracting a lesson of, well, this was not the right way. What is the right way? The lesson that they take from the experience is that this is just not for me. Okay. I cannot do this. Okay. So either I don't even remember that I failed, or I make this completely overgeneralized lesson that I just cannot do that. And a lot of the work is how to get people to get the specific lesson. Okay. What is the lesson here? Did you ask at the wrong time? Did you ask the wrong person? Did you ask for too much? What is the specific lesson that you can extract? A Carol Dweck's growth mindset comes to mind as a way to think about what you have learned instead of what does it mean about your personality, whatever that means in the first place. Something that we tried just as an exercise that we found extremely beneficial is asking people to give advice based on their failed experience. And what we do is asking people who are struggling with something to give advice to another struggler. So we didn't do it with donors, but we did it, let's say, with unemployed people, or with overweight, or with students that were struggling with their coursework. What we ask these people is to give advice to another struggler. And the first thing that they usually say is, why would you ask me? Like, I'm unemployed. Why would you ask me how to get a job? And I would say, well, I ask you because obviously, okay, you are struggling with this. And then they give advice. Often the advice is very important and meaningful and good. But what's more important for us, they are motivated by their advice. So the act of giving advice to another person often helps you extract the lessons that you have learned from your experience.
Yeah, wow. That reminds me a lot of Dr. Cross's work around distant self-talk and just the activity even of envisioning what would you say to a friend in this situation. So I love that connection. I want to ask you one other question before we have you share all the different ways for folks to find and get in touch with you. I'm curious about the tracking of progress towards a goal, that piece that you talked about, how important it is to have clarity around the goal, but then also to really be sort of following your progress towards that goal. Do you ever suggest that, based on what you were just talking about around sort of the failure component, or, needing to pivot, do you ever suggest that sort of in that middle zone, when they're tracking their progress towards a goal, if they're struggling in a certain way, or if there's certain indicators that it's time to perhaps set a different goal?
More to set sub goals. Okay. And what I mean by that is that in the middle, we see this decline in motivation. Okay. And so let's say that, you want to, collect $1,000 for a cause. The first and second and third donations will feel like you're making fast progress. Okay. Like if the first person gave $50 and the second person gave another $50, you've doubled. Toward the end, again, it feels like fast progress because you can see that the gap to the end goal closing very quickly. In the middle, your actions, other people's actions often seem like a drop in the bucket. Okay, like it's hard to see how these actions are important for the goal. You don't see progress, and this undermines motivation. And so you just break the goal. Okay, like all these goal targets that we set, I know that the organization is not going to stop their work once they have reached the goal, right? So if you're collecting $1,000 for your cause, you're not done when you reach that goal. You're just done with the sub goal, and there will be another thing next. And the idea is to create these short-term goals that are sufficiently challenging, but also you can still see progress. The middle is not too long because
wow.
you're losing it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to have a link for Get It Done, your book, in the show notes and everything. I really feel like fundraisers and fundraising teams need to buy your book and then design their fundraising strategies and plans, building in these components around goal setting. And I love this idea of really paying attention to the middle and what's happening in the middle and these sub goals. So thank you so much. I know that we have just touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of your wisdom around these issues. So tell folks the best way to follow along with your work or connect with you. And then I always invite folks, if they'd like to highlight a nonprofit that's near and dear to their heart, that we sort of spotlight on the show as well.
All animals organizations. And yeah, so I don't want to choose one because I like them all. So yeah,
we'll shout out a bunch of them.
Yeah, give to the animals. And what else? How to reach me? Well, get my book. Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation. Go on my website, ayeletfishbach.com. And if you ever want to run a study with your charity, then get in touch and let's think about how to study what gets people to give.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for all of this wisdom today.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure talking to you.